We are live.
Great. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute. We just went live with the video feed, so we'll give it just another minute or two, as I always do, for everybody to get logged in here. But go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. As soon as we get going, though, we are going to go ahead, because this is a good roundtable discussion, we're going to unmute everybody's microphone. So if you don't want to be heard, I request that you go ahead and mute yourself back on the other end, on your end, if you want your microphone to be quiet. But we're going to go ahead and unmute everybody so that everybody can provide some comments, speak. I'm hoping we're not going to talk over ourselves a little bit, but we're going to unmute everybody so that everybody can participate today, because this is really intended to be a roundtable discussion. I'm not going to do a real presentation. I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of the discussion and hear from you guys. So about another minute, we'll get everything going. Good. Okay. And Craig, I just got your message here that you sent in a draft of that. Bear with me. I'm going to launch my email. We'll go ahead and get that open. And yeah, I was kind of hoping to get it ahead of time, but it's not a problem at all. We'll make it all work. So hold on just a second. Okay, perfect. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started here? So Andrea, if you could go ahead and unmute everybody's mic, that would be fantastic. Okay. So it looks like we're getting everybody unmuted here, slowly but surely. We've got 20 people on, so I just ask that everybody be very cognizant of your surroundings. If you have background noise, if you hear anything like that, go ahead and please just mute yourself on your end, or if you need to take a phone call, anything, just go ahead and mute yourselves on your end, and that would be fantastic. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and start off here, because the folks with Keep Sedona Beautiful, Craig Swanson and John Black, have done a lot of work working with a private individual who is professional, I believe, professional survey writer here, and jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that, Craig. But they've gone through and kind of reworked our questions. So why don't we use this as our base of discussion tonight? And I'd love to hear, any comments, and then we'll get in. We've got some comments also that were sent in from Beaver Creek. We can kind of run through some of those and kind of see where we're at. So I'm going to share the screen, and as I said, I'm seeing this for the first time as well just now. So we're all going to look at this together. So we're going to share Word.
And I'll be happy, David, to just kind of go through some of the considerations we had as we were coming up with these drafts.
That would be great, Craig. And I'm going to go ahead. I'll be happy to hand that off to you. If you want to start walking through this a little bit, that would be fantastic. I'm going to blow this. Whoa, not quite that much. I'll blow it up on my screen here a little bit. Hopefully everybody can see that okay now. How does that look, Craig?
No. I'm not seeing there. Now I'm seeing the right-hand side.
Okay.
So I am in fact seeing all of it. It's, I suppose if somebody has full screen, then they'll see it just fine.
Great.
Does anybody on the call have difficulty reading what David is displaying?
Yeah.
Okay, hearing nothing. The first thing that we went through is talked about the scoring, the 0 through 5, and felt that that 0 column really would indicate one of two things. Either the person needs more information or they have no opinion. Now, it's possible that the county would want to separate those two items out, but we did feel that the notion that somebody would need more information in order to answer, to respond to the item, would be an important thing. As is no opinion. It's somebody who just really doesn't care about that one. Now, obviously, if somebody leaves an item completely blank, they're essentially saying they have no opinion. And then the numbers 1 through 5 from strongly disagree to strongly agree. We kept the same categories that you had, David, but we did add water because it appeared not to be in the first, the sample that you sent out. So we put a section on water that you'll see a little later on.
Okay.
Intent was to try to simplify things as much as possible, to keep away from jargon type of words, to try to make the statement as easy to understand as could be. And clearly, we still need some work in that regard, but that's one of the things that we did. And you'll see on the second item, it says our health and safety to be a primary concern of Yavapai County staff. One of the things that I've learned through this process is that aiming these, speaking about us and we as the community, is a good way to phrase items like this. Not that Yavapai County should do something, it's that we should be doing something. Now, there are some items here that are so obviously Yavapai County oriented, like number 5 under general. In our comprehensive plan, Yavapai County should document measurable goals that are monitored and reported on regularly. That's not the citizens doing that, that's Yavapai County doing that. So there's a number of items that reference something that Yavapai County should do. I think overall, that's what we were looking to do. We decided to number these for easy reference so that as this changes and goes through different versions, the county can say, version 1, general item 1 is so-and-so. And everybody knows exactly which one that is for reference. So that doesn't mean that those have to be numbered or it's even appropriate to number them when the survey is administered. But at least while it's being worked on, having them numbered makes really good sense. Would you like then to work through these? How would you like to attack them? Or just have everybody read the items under general and bring up questions that they might have about them?
Why don't we go ahead and do that, Craig? Let's have everybody take a moment here to take a look at just the general section, questions 1 through 7, and that way we can talk about each section as we go. So if everybody could maybe take a moment, read through those, and let's hear your thoughts here in just a moment.
Read this shit.
So I've got a couple comments here just in the window. Let me address those. Jean Marie, yes, you're an attendee. Everybody is to this, so that's normal. And then looks like if the document is too small, you're probably going to need to blow it up on your computer in order to see that a little bit bigger. So I think Andrea's probably got you taken care of now. If you have any more problems with that, please let us know.
Yeah, it's fine, Dave. I can see it fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm trying to manage about 10 different windows on my computer too, so I feel for you.
You're not full screen on your computer, David.
Oh. Well, I thought we were. Let's change that. So here's full screen on my computer. Did that help anybody?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good.
Didn't help me.
There is a little lag between when David does something and when it shows up on your WebEx screen. I'm still seeing, for example, the bottom. Oh, there it goes. It cleared up for me. So there is a little lag. Be patient as he moves in his window. There could be up to a 10-second lag before it's reflected on your computer screen.
So has everybody had an opportunity to go through the general section?
I can read.
David, you might even, since we're going to be going through this bit by bit, you might even see if are you using Word?
Yes, I'm in Word right now. You can zoom it in even further, blow it up even better.
I think that would be probably good if you can magnify it a little more.
You bet.
And see more of the left and right and less of the up and down. There you go.
Sure.
Oh, I can
Good.
read.
Okay, good. I'm looking at this on a 38-inch monitor here, so it looks off to me. So as long as everybody else can see it, that's what matters.
Are you going to talk about what the purpose of the survey is?
I'd be happy to get into that. So
Try to critique it?
You bet. So the purpose of the survey is so that we have a consistent survey for the community vision statements so that we can start the discussion for the comprehensive plan as we go forward. Right now, these are going to feed into a survey that's being put on the county website. We're going to have it done by community so that Williamson Valley will have their survey, the Sedona area will have theirs, the Rimrock Beaver Creek area. Everybody will have their own separate survey so that we can narrow the results down to those specific areas. Because I think we're going to find when we look at this, we're going to have a lot of similarities between the individual communities, but I think we're going to see some differences in kind of what their thoughts are. We're planning for an area that's, over 8,000 square miles. So we're going to have that differing viewpoint, across the county. Things that happen in Seligman for development are very different than the needs of, Rimrock and Beaver Creek or Congress. So we expect to see those, but the survey is to try to get an apples to apples comparison across all of the communities in the county so we can see where those differences exist. We can see what the goals in those communities are, and we can help find those similarities, but we also find the differences. We can identify possibly communities that could be grouped together from a regional approach and have that better discussion. So that's the intent of this survey. And this survey is not the end of the comprehensive plan. This is the very beginning. This is the first page of, quite frankly, what'll be a year of data collection and meetings, everything else to try to bring this plan together. So this is the very first part of this. So as we move forward, as we identify those differences, identify those trends, we will be able to drill down deeper and get a better understanding of what's behind it. So this is a high-level view of just the general concepts in the county as they relate to the 8 areas of the comprehensive plan that are required to be done. So that's our intent right now.
David, correct me if I'm wrong, but you use the term separate surveys, but that really means separately collated answers per community. The same survey would be administered across the county. So it will be one survey with people who are taking it, identifying what community they're in, so that you can sort their results by community.
Yes. And that is exactly it. So that when on the back end, we'll be able to break down all of that information and say, this is the Williamson Valley, this is the Congress, this is the, these are the answers that are coming out of those communities. And there's 2 ways we can look at it. We may be able to do it very easily on the data-driven end of it because the survey will be driven by GIS. So it'll be sitting in a ArcGIS format on the back end so that as people enter their address in, it'll be geo-referenced right into that area. We'll be able to parse those out very easily. Or we can run it on a multiple surveys so that we have a Williamson Valley, a Chino, a Paulden, across all of the different communities across the county. I'm personally leaning right now towards one survey, and then we parse the data out based on the answers from the geographic questions to help really identify where those trends are, where those communities are. But the important part is this is going to be geo-referenced. So as we go forward in all of the surveys, we can really ensure that, both sides of a community, the east and west or north and south is actually being represented. And it'll help you, the communities, as you do your outreach, to know where maybe you need to do some more outreach. If you're just not getting an answer from this subdivision or this area, then it gives you that data to be able to go in and say, look, hey, we really need you to get online and help answer some of these questions for us. So that's the reasoning behind having all of that geographic data on the back end. It works very well.
David?
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. It looks like we have some questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
And it looks like the first one would be Karen Crawford. I don't know if she wants to speak. I can unmute her.
Okay. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just been my experience doing a lot of surveys that I like the 0, but I think we need to put neutral and 0 and get rid of 5, because if you do 1 through 4, then you get a real feel for which side of the pendulum they're on. Mm-hmm. So just to work on, I mean, this is great, but just to fine tune it, just tweak it just a little bit. I just have found that it's very helpful to do would be 0 and 1 through 4 rather than 0 through 5.
Okay. So what you're indicating here then, just so that for the whole group understands, so your recommendation would be to eliminate essentially middle position, the neutral, and just make 0 a neutral position as well. So we'd have strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree, and then neutral would be considered that 0 position. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's correct. That's my suggestion.
Okay.
I worked with a lot of surveys as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, Karen. And then
it looks like the next one would be Nancy Steele, and I can unmute her.
Yeah, please go right ahead, Nancy. What's your question?
David, I can't, first of all, I can't find my copy of the draft survey, and so I can't see the whole survey.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You were talking about that this survey includes the required elements. Mm-hmm. And so I have a couple of questions, only one of which I put in the chat. And the required elements are great, but what are the optional elements that we're going to be considering?
Right now, this is kind of a neat part about this. So this is all community driven, and that's the real crux of doing a comprehensive plan, especially with community involvement very deeply in the communities. Right now, I don't know what the optional elements are. I'm actually really wanting to hear from the communities that what other things you guys have concerns with. One of the topics has been that's been mentioned is dark skies. Should we have a potential element or a portion of an element related to dark skies? We've got another comment in here, as I see in this. It looks like Robert Hoffman indicated preservation of wildlife. Those are the kinds of things we actually really want to hear as part of the surveys and as part of the whole process as we go forward. So once we start working on the main elements, that's where I want to kind of parse out and see what everybody's thoughts are on adding additional things to the plan that may be beneficial. But this is not, other than having 8 elements, which is required by state law, that's something we have to do. Nothing we're doing right now is set in stone. And that's the beauty of this, is we're really wanting to hear what everybody's thoughts are and what we can do moving forward. So,
right,
well, if I could speak to that just a second from the perspective of KSB, as we put this draft together, number 7, we need to preserve and protect our archaeological and historical sites. From our perspective at KSB, we're going to be recommending that there is an element on cultural resources. But we don't think that the survey necessarily has to have a separate section on cultural resources in order for the county to realize that all sorts of people in the county feel that number 7 is very important. That will lend credence to the notion that there needs to be a section on cultural resources. The same is true of a lot of other topics that we may want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
If
And,
I
and I think, when we talk about cultural resources, another part of this is preservation of native plants. We have some areas, especially, excuse me, in the southern part of the county, the low elevations, where we've got, 100-year-old, 200 or 300-year-old saguaros. Native plants that are protected under other Arizona state laws, but it would be nice to recognize those as part of our overall planning efforts and be able to address that. But yes, archaeological, historical, native plants, native wildlife, all of that, those are all things that we need to be able to look at here as we go forward.
Okay, and the next participant that has a question in the Q&A box is Max Wilson, and I can try unmuting him.
Go right ahead.
Thank you guys for putting this on tonight. I'm excited for the conversation. I guess I would just say in general, I think as a broad comment looking at these, we should do our best to try to eliminate these kind of value-laden words that insinuate something is good or bad, like, the way of life that many in our county enjoy, the benefits of development, things like that make something sound intrinsically good. Or else we're going to get stuck into trying to do that for every single thing. We should conserve working ranches, which are good things.
Okay. Somebody kind of covered you with a keyboard there. I apologize. Do you mind finishing that thought, Max?
Yeah, just that.
You covered part of it.
I think we should do our best to try to make these as value neutral statements as possible.
Okay. Very good. Very good. And then, Tom, is your microphone, and Andrea, I apologize, I can't see the microphone right now, so I don't know who's on and who's off.
He is unmuted.
Okay, great. Tom, you had a comment?
Yes, looking at number 3, it's balance between development and its impacts on the environment. I would suggest a question about the balance between development and quality of life. Although environment is included in the quality of life, it is not all encompassing.
So Tom, why don't you expand on that a little bit? What are you talking about when you speak about quality of life? Because I think that's actually a really good comment to bring out, because everybody looks at it a little differently. But what aspect would you be looking at here?
Well, it's going to be subjective to each person that's reading the question. But in general, quality of life refers to everyday life, their local neighborhood, their shopping district, their the business district, and how accessible it is, care. It all ties into quality of life.
Okay.
But it's separate from environment.
I would absolutely agree with that. Okay, very good. And that's something that we're already behind the scenes kind of looking at. We have members of the health department who are very interested in participating with us as far as helping, formulate some goals for healthy communities, the ability to walk, shop, have healthcare and everything. So I think that very well dovetails into that. I really do. I think that's great. So. And then scrolling down. Okay, so Nancy, your comment right now, I see your comment in the Q&A related to flowing rivers. We're going to be getting down to that here in just a minute. So are there any other questions related to general items right now before we move into land use? Nope. Okay, hearing none, let's roll down to land use here. Oops. There we go. So why doesn't everybody take just a moment to read through the land use ones?
Hello, David. It looks like Nancy has another comment or question.
No, I'm good. I'm fine.
Okay, good, thank you.
And one of the things people are going to see in this as they look through it is that number 12 and number 13 look the same. But the challenge that we posed for ourselves as we looked through these is how do we eliminate a statement that is compound, where there's really two items being stated, and forcing a respondent to do one answer when it's really talking about two items.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
the flip side of that is it proliferates the number of questions.
Well, Craig, I actually think it's very good to separate these two particular questions out, because we have two different regulating authorities related to this. So item number 12 addresses building on hillside lots. The subdivision regulations here for Yavapai County do have hillside provisions already in them. Item number 13, development standards created to limit building near natural washes and drainage areas, starts to come into our flood control realm here a little bit. So those are, I think, very good discussions. I think they actually should be separate because we've got different interests involved in both of those. So I think both of those are actually very good questions. We talk about number 14, you've got that in there, upper limits for development density. That is absolutely where we're going to be going with a land use map, land use plan overall for the county. So I'd love to hear people's comments on that. Let me see.
We tried to make this as simple a statement as possible.
I agree. I agree.
Hey, David, it looks like there's a lot of Q&A or question and answers going on in the box here. David Hankey has a question, and I will unmute him.
Okay, great. David, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Dave. I just was concerned, will the general public understand the differences between these two things without some sort of explanation?
You know, I don't think right now, I don't think right now the public may or may not understand the difference between regulatory authority over 12 and 13. But I think separating them out does kind of help that a little bit, because we've got obviously communities that have the hillside regulations and have the hillside concerns, and they do tend to be different than a lot of our areas with the flood concerns, you know, related to that. So I think, I don't know that I would want to go into too much more explanation here in the survey, but it's definitely something that we're going to have a larger discussion on, depending upon what the answers come out as. And, you know, at that point, we can involve the, we can very easily involve our flood control. We can speak through the planning department very well on the hillside development standards. And, but I think it's good to have those separate, because I'd like to see, you know, from a regulatory authority, kind of what we're looking at, because they are viewed upon differently. You know, the federal government has no dog in the fight, so to speak, for a hillside lot. But boy, you get into washes and drainage areas, and, you know, the federal government's going to step right in on that. That's a major authority. And then, of course, our flood control is the regulator of a lot of those ordinances and rules. That's something they're going to have to be very concerned with. So I think I would probably, I'd be curious to see what the answers are, quite frankly.
One of the ways, if the question was getting at, does the reader understand what this means? One way to get at that would be to have a test of this survey on some small subgroup, some cohort of 50 people, for example, where the survey is administered to those people. But as part of the survey, we're asking people whether this item is confusing to them. Do they understand it? Is it clear? Should it be reworded? So, David, you might want to consider having something like that before the survey is let loose onto the public, of having a test bed for it.
Mm-hmm.
An excellent idea.
Okay, I hear somebody saying excellent idea. Thank you. I couldn't catch who that was, but thank you. And yes, we can certainly do that. The only thing I would ask is that you know, that test group turn it around quickly so we can get it integrated and get it moving forward. Does anybody have any other questions or comments on the land use section before we move on to transportation?
Looks-
This is, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Go ahead, who's asking it? Yes, we can.
Is we should promote orderly, concentrated growth in or near existing communities where appropriate levels of infrastructure and services exist. I think that's a fine question or item to ask, but how do we control that when you've got cities like into those areas and in areas that are away from their central zone?
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't. The cities have the right to legislate and take actions as they see fit under Arizona state law. So it does that question makes it very difficult when we look at a context between an annexation in another jurisdiction and the county. The cities have the right to go through an annexation process. So that does make it difficult. But I think here what I would be looking at interpreting wise is, in those areas, should we try to encourage that growth in closer to, have it adjacent to Prescott Valley, for instance? Should we work on land planning, especially closer to those cities, as part of the plan for, kind of the next phase of development? Or, should we be launching out miles and miles and just allowing this, kind of uncontrolled zoning request that we've had for quite a long time? The land plan and, this comprehensive plan is going to put a lot of controls in place that we don't have right now. That's going to help really kind of limit this down and give us, frankly, what I believe are going to be better applications. Right now, we don't have any stop gaps. So everything that comes in the front door, we have to process. Having a better plan, I think, is going to help a lot of this. But you're absolutely right. Cottonwood elected to annex that in. That's their right to, grow their community. And, the county's kind of stuck short on that.
So David,
Uh-huh.
Mr. Hoffman made a suggestion in the Q&A box that number 13 should add to protect riparian habitat.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with including that in there as far as adding riparian areas into question number 13. So it would say development standards created to limit building near natural washes, drainage areas, and riparian areas. I think that's very appropriate. That's a great comment. It's a great addition.
And you'll see riparian areas addressed later on, but I also agree.
I think that's a great comment. And then it looks like Karen has a comment about rework the wording of 12 and 13 to help eliminate the confusion. Okay.
Yeah, I just think they look too much alike. And I think that's even with our test bed, I think that we're going to get questions. So if we can rework one of them so they don't look so much alike, I think it will help.
I think so, or maybe split them up so they're not sitting next to each other. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Okay. Any other comments on land use?
This is Max Wilson again. I have one. There's a couple here, in particular, the one on ranches and on existing communities, I think are kind of conflating two things that aren't necessarily related. A lot of our existing communities have abysmal infrastructure, especially from like a water resources perspective, wastewater perspective. So if I was answering that question, I wouldn't know, am I saying it should be near existing communities or only near existing communities that have infrastructure? So I think we should try to separate those two things out.
Okay.
Max, this is Craig. Could you shoot me wording that, noodle that over a little and shoot me some wording?
You got it, Craig.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Anything else on land use?
Hello.
Yes.
This is about the attempt to get through. I was hoping it was being heard. On item 8, we need to add the word farms, where it says we should conserve our working ranches and farms, because we have a number of instances where you have farms and ranches really operating together. And I believe the old farms will fit very much into that section.
Yes. I agree completely, Harvey. I would agree with that. So item 8 should say we should conserve our working ranches and farms. I agree with that completely. That's a great addition, Harvey.
Yep, got it.
Okay. So moving down into transportation, we'll do this in 2 parts here since my screen's cutting it off.
Excuse me, David. It looks like Nancy Steele has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Just a comment on number 13. It uses the language natural washes and drainage areas. Can we add rivers and streams?
Actually, I think I saw in this and I saw it very briefly, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, we get into rivers and streams down in the water element?
Yes, I understand that, but number 13 just says near natural washes and drainage areas. On the Verde side, we have rivers. We actually have rivers. So I think if you could say natural washes, rivers, and drainage areas, it would speak more to the people on the side of the mountain where we actually have some rivers. Although I know you have rivers in Prescott too.
Yes, we do. They're not as big, but we do.
I would like to see you add rivers in there explicitly.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good addition.
Nancy, the reason we did this is Craig, the reason we did this is that the natural washes and drainage areas are the usual dry land as opposed to the rivers and streams. So we very deliberately segmented out rivers and streams to another area of the survey. So if you would, after this session is done and we've gone through everything, let me know if you still have a problem with 13, because I think your concern is going to be answered.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, David?
Yes, Thomas, I think it was Tom. Go ahead, Tom, and then we're going to go to Bridget next.
Okay. Number 10, 2 parts. We should promote orderly. I don't think the county needs to be promoting. I would say change that to allow for. And in that same question, concentrated growth, I think needs to be changed. Higher density is to be confused.
Okay, so you're recommending, so item number 10 you're recommending would say, and I'm paraphrasing you here, Tom, so something to the effect of communities to allow orderly, high density growth. Am I following you there?
Increased density areas.
Increased density, okay.
Concentrated growth just sounds, way overdeveloped. Whereas increased densities is more neutral.
You bet. And this is and Tom, I want to say this is a good point, because we all look at these words very differently from a planning point of view. I look at concentrated and I think just higher density, I think that, but obviously this says something different to you. So this is, I want to say, I'm really glad we're doing this, because you guys everybody's getting a chance to see this in a different light than, the biases that I bring to the table, or anybody else. So that's actually a really good comment. So I appreciate that. So
yeah, it's know your audience. Know your audience.
Well, exactly. And, even though, we're in this industry, we do look at things differently, and how, we communicate, especially communicating with lawyers and everybody else, we do tend to communicate differently on that. So I appreciate that. So increased density and allow for orderly increased density. Okay, perfect. And then Bridget, you had a comment. I'm sorry for the delay. Go ahead.
Strive to offer a variety of housing options. My text is covered here by some other text.
No,
matching.
I can read it for you. I can read it for you if you'd like. I've got it right in front of me here.
Suddenly over it, so
Not
Would you
a
read it?
problem. So what you wrote, Bridget, was communities should strive to offer a variety of housing options to match the different income levels of residents. So that gets into our affordable housing. And I think that would probably be good. Craig, if we were to get it, I think that would be good as a standalone question. Because obviously the incentive is one question here for item 11, but I think we should probably look at including that in, because that is important. You know, we're 1,800 units short right now in the Verde Valley from the Pollock study for affordable workforce housing. So that may be a really good addition to include in there.
This is Harvick.
Okay.
There's a major problem in our county over the years about housing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our county has not had a housing authority and therefore receives less money in grants from the State Department of Housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to place out for consideration as a statement in the that the county establish a housing authority to increase federal funding for housing, and it could be left just at that.
Yeah. And Harvey, I don't disagree with you at all. I think on this survey, though, I think delving as deep as a housing authority, which is going to be something, would be driven by legislative acts. I think I would probably keep it out of this, and I would probably have that as part of a larger discussion, more focused on the comprehensive plan on the county-wide level when we have that discussion versus, this, which is we're really trying to get down into the individual communities again. But again, this is not the only survey we're doing. This is just to get the ball rolling. But I think the housing authority discussion would probably be a great one at the comprehensive level. That's something that would be very positive to have those discussions. And I'll be honest, I don't know from a legislative point of view if there was interest in doing that, what would even have to happen to create one on a county-wide level right now. I'm not familiar, but I just feel that's probably a better discussion on the comprehensive plan level. So I wrote that down in my notes so we can get that included as we get further down the line.
Okay, that's acceptable to me. Thanks.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you. And then let me scroll down here again.
Like Robert Hoffman has a comment about number 10 should prohibit high density.
Okay. So I guess the question right now is, the only problem I would have with that, Robert, is what would high density be? That would be one of the big questions, and I think that's probably the discussion we need to have as we get closer into the land use map and those comprehensive plan discussions. Because what I'd really like is the communities to start talking among themselves. What is high density? Because high density varies depending upon where we are in the county and what type of construction is being done. But the density question, that's one we're going to keep circling back around to as we go through this whole process. So. It's not going to be forgotten. I can guarantee that. So, moving on, looks like we're all caught up here. And I just want to remind everybody, you can unmute yourselves. If you need to, just unmute yourself and jump in here. But let's go ahead and read these next 4 under transportation on this page, and then we'll roll to the next page. So everybody could take a moment for that.
While it's happening, in order to address that last question on density, if we move what had been item number 14 above what is now item number 10, we're saying first we should set upper limits for development density. Then we're saying we should promote orderly increased density in or near. And I think that drives home the point that the primary concern is setting upper limits for density.
Mm-hmm.
We debated at KSB whether to talk about the map in this, and we decided that was getting too technical and too far down the line.
Yeah. And when we talk about the map, while everybody else is reading here, Craig, when we talk about the map, I really want to be able to have everybody have maps of their own communities in hand so that you can look in your communities and say, oh, this subdivision over here is 3 dwelling units per acre. Now I have a visual understanding of what that is, because density is really tough if you're trying to figure out, because everybody tends to think their lot's a little bigger, that the math doesn't always work. You have to add streets in and everything else. And it's really tough to have those comparisons. So as we get forward, and we've got our GIS department is working on this in the background. We're probably, a couple months out from even starting to really work with the map and everything on that. We'll have those maps available. And our goal is to have an interactive map available for everybody to be able to comment on, so that you can drill into your community, look at that vacant piece of land because it hasn't been identified yet for a density, and be able to comment on what those densities should be. But being able to do that in context of seeing what the rest of the community already is. So that's something that we are working on behind the scenes so we can get that information out. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work with that, because we're talking hundreds of thousands of parcels that we're going to be identifying right now for densities and putting that together. So let's start talking about transportation. Does anybody have any comments on these first 4 transportation questions?
Yes, David.
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Number 18, we should construct trails, walking paths, and bike paths that are separate from roadways to ensure our safety. I would add where appropriate, because in many, many cases, it should be not appropriate to even consider that.
I think that's very reasonable. You're absolutely right. There are some areas it's very appropriate, and some areas it's just not appropriate. So I think that's a good addition, Tom.
Number 19, incentives should be offered for developments that promote walking or riding in a bicycle and shopping service. Mm-hmm. I don't know any development that 100% of the people would use walking or riding a bike. So I don't think incentives are even appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and that's something that would come out of the survey. A lot of communities use the planned area development zoning as their incentive to include in those walkable paths or bike lanes and stuff. The increased development costs for the infrastructure, the planned area development is part of that offset, kind of a negotiation tool. A lot of communities do use that very effectively in the planning world. When we talk about incentives, I hate that word, because a lot of people think incentive means, the taxpayer is going to give money for this. And that's almost never the case. You almost never see, taxpayer money being provided to a developer to do that. But the incentives could be trade-offs for increased density, for open space, shifts around different things, to help do a project to provide those additional benefits. So that's always a tough one.
Well, we both don't like the word incentives. Perhaps somebody can come up with something.
Offsets, perhaps. But again, offsets are almost tough. Maybe Greg offset that one around and figure that out a little bit. Maybe a little way to word that differently.
Respondents won't understand what offsets means, unfortunately.
And that's why I kind of stopped
with this on we struggled with this on incentives in addition. And I think everybody understands the incentive is something good that they get without stating exactly what it is.
Exactly.
Well, perhaps if we used encouraged instead of offered, make it read incentives should be encouraged for developments that promote.
Okay, I kind of like that, actually. Because again, offered has that negative connotation that somebody's out there with money handing it to them.
Yep.
I kind of like that offset.
Well, the only problem with that is when you say encouraged, you're being wishy-washy. Encouraged. Well, maybe I'll give them an incentive, maybe I won't. Offering an incentive means, yes, the county will offer something. We're not saying what. but it is going to be offered to them.
Something will be offered,
I would
yes.
have a contrary notion on that one and think that encouraged is not strong enough.
Yeah. Well, let's, why don't you and I think about that one, Craig, and see what we can come up with.
Great.
Now, I just saw Camille popped a note in. Andrea, if you could unmute Camille, she had a question, I believe. Great, you're unmuted, Camille. Go ahead.
We can't hear you,
Yeah,
Camille.
Camille, I can barely hear you.
Is that better?
Yes, much.
Okay, great. Anyway, back to number 18. We're talking trails, walking paths, and bike paths. Have we addressed? Because I can't see the whole. Haven't read the whole survey here. Equestrian paths.
We very deliberately did this just for people only. I believe there's something else later in the document about equestrian. I'm going to do a quick search to see, but Camille, our intent was to, we deliberately excluded equestrian from this one.
Yeah. And Camille, what I would say, sitting in my chair, I would interpret trails to include equestrian trails. We look at those multimodal trails, and when we say the word trails, I would envision equestrian is included in that.
And number 31 down in open space, Camille, if you want to take a note, is the one where we deal with equestrian.
Awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. And Camille, we're going to go ahead and leave you unmuted just so you can jump in here since you're having difficulties. And then let's check off on the side over here. Andrea, I've kind of lost track of our questions. If you could jump in on our next one, please.
The next one would be Robert Hoffman, and I don't believe he has audio, but his question should somehow eliminate the idea the incentives are monetary, and I don't know what that's commented on.
I understand completely, and that's what Craig and I are going to work on as far as the wording on that specific question. So we'll be definitely addressing that. And then Carla, you had a question. It looks like Andrea answered that, and yeah, I show we've got 24 people right now online with this. So coming back into transportation, I didn't realize we only had one more question here on the bottom. So
David,
does anybody have any other comments on transportation?
It looks like Harvey's hand is up.
Okay. Harvey, did you have something?
Yes. We discovered that with the COVID crisis, it's been very difficult for people who do not have their own means of transportation, which is often people of low income and older folks.
Yes.
That public transit, where it's available, should include on its route food sources. By food sources, it means like grocery stores and that sort of thing. But also now we're finding a much heavier load on food banks and food pantries. So I'd like to put that out for consideration.
Okay.
And it looks like Camille has her hand up. I don't know. She's unmuted.
Yeah, go ahead, Camille.
No, that was from my.
That was from before? Okay. No worries. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, open space. So does everybody take a moment to run through the open space questions?
David, this is Jim Fortney. Can I interrupt you a second?
Go right ahead, Jim, please.
I'm a little confused. I didn't join until about 2 minutes to 6, but apparently I must have missed half the meeting. Number one, why are we not reviewing the materials that were presented? And who are the people that have prepared this document that you're presenting?
Okay, so the materials we presented, I've been updated by Keep Sedona Beautiful. We elected to go into this because they brought in outside people to go ahead and update the questions and everything. That's why we dove directly into this plan immediately as opposed to going through our questions. This is a significantly enhanced version of what we had originally sent out. So that's why we're going through this now. And I just got it just before the meeting as well. So that's why we're kind of taking our time.
Distributed before we tried to talk about it.
Because I got it literally 1 minute before the meeting started as well. That's why we're trying to do this right now. And that's why we're doing it as a roundtable meeting.
My input is that this evening is totally inappropriate. The majority of the comments I've heard so far are taking valid survey questions and turning them into policy statements, which is not what you want. That was one of the reasons I asked you to please explain the purpose of the survey. And if I can expand upon it, the purpose of the survey is to talk to a lot of people who are not planning people whatsoever and determine what their purposes, interests, and desires are. And most of the changes I've heard so far this evening, you are changing reasonably valid survey questions into policy statements. And I personally object to that.
I appreciate that, Jim. That's noted. I disagree. I think we're actually getting a better survey right now than we had before, as far as all of this is concerned. And again, this is going to go out to review once we get final updates on everything. But we had a lot of criticism at the last meeting that the survey that we had put out originally was not adequate. And that was why, you know, we're going through this exercise, is to have the roundtable to get the additional comments in from everybody on that. But we received a tremendous amount of criticism already related to the survey we put out, which was a community survey used, you know, by communities across the county on the last go around. So, you know, as I said, this is to get the discussion going, and I think it digs a little deeper than we had originally intended, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So, okay. On the open space, does anybody have any questions?
I have a comment. I believe that items that need to be protected and preserved could be combined. 3 or 4 of these items under open space could be potentially combined under one, you know, basic charge of protecting and preserving.
Okay.
And this is Craig Swanson. Do you have particular items in mind? The challenge we had as we came through, and I want to emphasize, this is our very tentative draft. We're open to any and all changes that are appropriate. But we found that when we started combining items, we started losing the discrimination of understanding whether a respondent was talking about A or B. And that's one of the reasons that we did splitting out of items. So if you have some that you think should be combined, would like to know which those are.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I think when you say national forest land, you could include other areas of land, you know, that can be identified, whether it's, you know, Bureau of Land Management land or it's listed under, let's see, things like scenic vistas. You know, would scenic vistas fit under a more of a general statement?
Well, as you bring up number 22, national forest land, the thought that I have is perhaps that should instead say public land.
That's exactly what I was going to agree with.
Yeah, because we didn't mean it to imply that other public land shouldn't be protected and preserved. So that point is really good. On scenic vistas, that's not necessarily limited to public land. It's that there is a value to scenic vistas on its own that should be considered by the county.
Okay.
So that was our rationale for splitting number 27 out.
Okay. One thing I would say, Craig, is item number 26 can be deleted. We are required by state law to do an inventory of open space as part of our comprehensive plan. So that one can be taken off the table, where it's already going to happen as a requirement of state law.
And you'll notice that from the one that you initially sent out, there were some things, some questions in there that had to do with requirements the county was already obligated. So we removed those. But that's
that was something I've been thinking about that we should have deleted off.
Yeah, I've got this one stricken out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on open space? Okay, moving on, energy. Take a moment to read this.
And while people are reading it, I want to draw attention to number 35, 37, and 38. They seem like they're the same thing, but we thought it might be important to have people to, be able to weigh in separately on rooftop and residential solar from commercial wind farms, from pumped water renewable energy. So rather than lumping renewable energy sources together, we very deliberately split them up.
And David, I have a Joan who has a question in the box there, but I have unmuted her if she would like to speak.
Great, go ahead, Joan.
Well, I'd just like to say on question number 24 that there needs to be a balance in promoting economic growth because it can have a negative effect on the quality of life for the residents. And I feel as an equestrian living in the village of Oak Creek, it's difficult to access trails and, you know, be able to get around. So I just would like to say there needs to be a balance because it does have a negative effect on some of the residents.
Okay, very
When you say it has a negative effect, what is it?
Well, I can't access the trailheads because where trailer parking is provided, cars park there, and there's just less access from properties. So a lot of us need to access trailheads through the parking lot area.
And is your focus relatively specifically equestrian use?
No, I
Okay.
also ride a mountain bike and I hike. But yes, so as even as a mountain bike rider too, it's very difficult to park at the trailheads. But I can ride my bike to a trail where typically I used to be able to ride certain roads to the trails, but with the traffic from the tourists, it's gotten very difficult.
One thing I point out, and I'm the past president of Friends of the Forest, so I worked with the Forest Service relatively closely, is if you're talking about Forest Service trailheads, the county wouldn't have any ability to impact that. So I don't know if you're specifically thinking of Forest Service trailheads.
Okay, well, I guess my concern was just with encouraging or promoting the development for economic purposes. It does have, or it can have a negative effect on the residents. quality of life.
I can understand that. And we do have a lot of complaints. I mean, it's been in the paper in the last week in Sedona. The trailheads, it's been a long day. I'm forgetting the church's name. It's the incredibly famous church. But they've had a tremendous amount of activity up there where people are just illegally parking everywhere and blocking neighborhoods off. So I understand where you're coming from on that, Joan. And I think that's something that, we need to find a better way to, massage those goals a little bit as we get further down, because it should not have a negative impact on communities. And that's the tough part of trying to find that balance. But I understand where you're coming from on that.
Thank you.
I have I have a question. It's Jean Marie Haney. And
yes.
under cost, I wonder if some of these things can be addressed under the cost of development section, or if that's really just a monetary section.
No, cost of development. I think stuff like that should be, included in there. The problem with cost of development is how do we quantify? And I'm speaking rhetorically here, just something to think about. How would we quantify the impact of a subdivision on the tourism use of a trailhead in the immediate area? It's very difficult to have that correlation. Now, with that said, if that community has a trailhead in it as part of that subdivision, that's where the incentive for a planned area development may come in, to have them build additional parking for that trailhead to accommodate that as an offset to something else. So there's ways to get there. We just have to figure that out as we get a little deeper in. But it's a good discussion to have because it is an issue. It absolutely is. Okay. And then Karen, I see your question in here real quick. I'm gonna kind of front load it here anyways. Item 35, Craig, that should just say residential solar, not rooftop, because obviously people can mount them on ground mount and other places. You could do a trailer if you wanted to. So I think just residential solar should be residential solar encouraged and incentivized.
And let's be sensitive to the fact that there also is wind. So
yes, there is.
We keep talking solar, but there is wind.
Well, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I would make wind a residential wind generator, residential wind turbine should be encouraged and incentivized. I would make that as a separate question though, because the visual impact, we have a lot of people, they don't, solar's in the environment all around, nobody thinks twice about it anymore, but people do start getting concerned when that neighbor tips up a 50-foot tall wind turbine in their backyard. So I think I would look at those as two separate, distinct questions, just based on our experience with complaints on it. So
yes.
Okay, and then you see here. Who was that?
Jim, this is Jim Collins.
Oh, go ahead,
I think
Jim.
you have to be really careful about things like 35, 36, and 37 when we talk about solar and wind and encouraging them. With now 36, says that we need to do that without harm to wildlife, border streams, and blah 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 blah. But you get into neighborhoods, and it doesn't even have to be a dense neighborhood, where rooftop solar could cause a lot of problems among the neighbors because of the reflection off the solar panels into other people's homes. Same thing goes with wind. Encourage construction of commercial wind farms. Those have to be very cautiously placed so that they don't affect other people in the areas. You probably have read a lot of stories about some of the harm that has come from people putting up wind farms. So I think we need to be real cautious to say these things.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. One of the things we do have to address, we have to address it as a policy because we have to encourage it, according to state law, is the big commercial solar farms. We've got to give how do I want to say it? It's not benefits to them, but we have to look favorably at large commercial scale solar farms, that's something we have to look at. The wind farms kind of get lumped in there, but honestly, there's very few places in Yavapai County where a commercial scale wind turbine really can even go. It's we've only got a few areas where the wind is even high enough on a sustained level that it's cost effective to do and close enough to the grid to be able to tie in to transmit that energy. So that's a good thing. And then we had also, Tom made a quick comment, a question 33 to strike cost effective. I quite frankly, I think that kind of simplifies it. Increase the use of clean alternative energy. I think crossing out cost effective doesn't hurt us at all. I think it just clarifies and simplifies the question a little bit.
Yes, I think cost effective is really a subjective statement.
It is.
It just doesn't fit in with the intent of the question.
I've removed it. It's gone.
Great. And then.
And it looks like David Mickey.
Yeah, I see your comment, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
He keeps muting himself here.
The buyback rate on solar energy, and 7 years ago, you could sell it back, and the buyback on your solar energy on your roof of your house was like a 7-year return on investment. Now it's a 20 to 25 year return on investment. So it makes less sense now if APS continues to change and downgrade their rates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree completely, and that's part of the problem now.
We just put solar on our house, and our payback period is expected to be 8 years. So the loss of buyback is, I think, being overcome by the reduction of price of solar, which is likely to continue. Just FYI.
That would be good. I'd love to have it on my house too. I don't have it yet. So any other questions, comments on the energy portion before we move to environmental? Okay, moving to environmental. Okay, so this one's big, so we'll take this in two pieces here. Let me take a moment to go through and read these through real quick. And Carla just made a good comment over on the side, is that we can, and we will add language to this, that if somebody does not want to respond to it, they can certainly, check the box out that either they're neutral or no response on that as well. It won't skew the numbers. If they just don't answer that question, they're not included in that. So if they don't have an interest, I agree completely. This is not a test. They don't have to do every single question. So I agree completely. Thank you, Carla. Okay, I'm going to jump in here, Craig, on item number 48 first, if we could. As far as establishing a countywide dark sky ordinance, we already have it. Our dark sky ordinance is countywide. So that's one of the big benefits of it. But we've got a lot of interest right now, and we're doing research behind the scenes to see about seeking a dark sky certification for the whole county right now. So if we could just reword that, should we establish or let's see, should Yavapai County seek certification as the first dark sky county? That's probably what I would recommend.
Yep, I made the change in my copy.
Great. So what are some of the comments on environmental?
I would mention for number 44, that solid waste disposal is essential. We ran a project of food waste recovery that diverted about 500 tons of food waste from the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So the word food, I think, could be inserted in that item 44.
And I'm sorry, I missed the word that you're saying.
Food.
Included?
Yeah, food.
Food?
F-O-O-D.
Into 44. I guess I don't see how 40 be worded with the word food in it.
Well, it is often not thought of, but it is a major goal in federal government because roughly 40% of the food we produce is wasted.
Understood, but what I don't understand how that would impact an item that talks about methods of disposal safeguarding our health.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the wording because it should be, well, I can let it go. But,
Harvey, I think that would be good to include as a better discussion down the line at the comprehensive plan level, not the community vision statement level. I think it would be better.
David?
Yes.
I believe he's referencing like composting food waste, and that could be added as another number.
Harvey, are you referring to composting, or are you referring to actually diverting it before it becomes into the food banks, before it becomes expired?
Food waste is a major problem that Arizona on a statewide level has not really dealt with. It's beginning to, but in our project, we saw that food would be delivered in 3 different destinations. One, edible food that would feed the food banks, feed people who go to the food banks. Number 2, it would go to feed farm animals for the farmers and ranchers. And then number 3, it would go to compost. And the compost is important agriculturally because it rebuilds the soil and produces sustainable agriculture.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, Craig?
No, my immediate thought is that this seems to me to be a policy statement for within the comprehensive plan, something like the county will implement a food waste initiative program to blah, 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 as opposed to in the survey. It is something that the group that I was working with is keenly interested in stopping food waste, because you're absolutely right. It's a horrific problem.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me to be a policy issue that would go into the comprehensive plan itself.
I think so.
But Harvey, keep everybody's feet to the fire to make sure it gets in the comprehensive plan.
Well, and I want to say to everybody, I included Harvey in this. We had discussions about 6 months ago when this was just starting to see the light of day here a little bit. And I've asked Harvey to be part of all of our programs because he does bring a very unique perspective to this that is not normally included in a comprehensive plan. So I think that's fantastic. So number 49, Robert had a quick question here. He's asking on 49, what is meant by manage? I'm kind of not sure this question should be in here because I look at the off-highway vehicle enforcement, and that's already done very actively by our sheriff's office and Game and Fish. Yavapai County really doesn't have any lands where we would have off-highway vehicle use. Excuse me, that we would be allowing or creating areas, anything like that. It really does come down to state law. So I would almost delete number 49.
Can I get the sense of others who are on the call about that? And Birgit, I know what you feel about it. It's an issue, quite honestly, it's an issue that Keep Sedona Beautiful has emphasized lately. The problems here in Jerome, we heard it on a city council meeting not that long ago from Cottonwood, that this is becoming a bigger problem in our particular area. So that's why we were incented to put it in.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, what is the problem? What is the exact problem that you're seeing with that? Maybe I'm misunderstanding where you're coming from.
It's a combination of things. It's an incredible amount of noise because people don't have to have mufflers. It's a safety issue because they tear like demons on the unpaved roads, and it's a health issue because the dust that they raise is absolutely killing all of the vegetation on either side of unpaved roads. And it's also hurting the health of residents that are near those. So for the people that are impacted by it in our area, it's a enormous and growing problem.
Okay. I guess the only problem that I have with that, Craig, is that if they are a licensed off-highway vehicle, so they've got a license plate on them, there is no regulations out there that we could do to prohibit them from, somebody going down the road on a motorcycle, a Harley, or driving a truck. And that's been one of the big challenges that they've had. Is the only restrictions that I've seen that have been effective have been on the national forest level, where they've closed forest regions down to all vehicles, or Game and Fish, where they've created these off-highway vehicle areas for people to use them in, to try to get them out of one area and move them into another that's not as sensitive. I think the management of that is actually exceedingly difficult because they are considered vehicles now. So you have to, if you prohibit them, you got to prohibit everybody. I think it becomes a very problematic issue. Noise. County does not have a noise ordinance today, which is something that helps kind of foster this problem. So Cave Creek years ago did a noise ordinance on the Harleys because they had people racing Harleys up and down, Main Street in Cave Creek, causing a lot of problems. So that one's tough. It's a good question. I don't disagree with the impact. I'm not a fan of them myself. But I'm not quite sure how we address it. Not sure how we address it in a comprehensive plan. It feels more of a law enforcement, county ordinance type of an issue, more than a land development type issue.
I have a comment.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
This is John Black. It seems to me if this is a survey, what we're talking about is taking a survey to find out what people want. An issue about how you implement it is secondary to knowing what it is that people really want. So It's really inviting input. It seems to me like we could leave a question like that in and then figure out if there's anything you can do about it or how you go about it.
Yeah. I just don't want to have any false expectations, John. I have no objection to the question remaining. To me, this leads to a better question down the line of, what is the impact? What are the negatives? Is it noise? Is it dust? Is it, that they took all the parking spaces in Jerome today? I think it's a question we have to delve a little deeper into.
Maybe we work on that question down the road before we put it online.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions on environment?
It looks like Max Wilson had a question on number 41. Or the question or comment, I would separate overuse and pollution in question 41.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an issue that we had in a few other surveys that have been done where it's hard to know from a policy perspective what actions we should take if you lump the two together under one question.
Okay. So Max is talking about separating out 41 into two separate questions. The overuse portion of it and then the pollution portion of it.
That's one question. This is John Black again. That's one question that has come up repeatedly as we process these questions. Some of them are compound questions. Someone might want to answer one way, part of it in another way. So it's best to separate. In this case, overuse and pollution are two distinct problems. It'd be better to split them into two questions so people compare.
I think so too. I think so too. Okay. Let's see here.
David, it looks like Bridget has a.
Yeah, Bridget, go ahead with your comment. Bridget, go ahead. Okay. She's got a part two here. So Bridget has concerns over the off-highway vehicle problem. And then she went in to state that the county shares law enforcement with the National Forest on National Forest roads. And that is absolutely correct. You know, we absolutely share law. Go ahead.
Can I address this problem?
Go right ahead, Bridget.
The example is the National Forest goes through a road, goes directly by a residential road. The road is unpaved. In the drought we're having, road cover is interesting to find dust. Each vehicle, but especially the OHVs with their bigger tires, raises a thick cloud of dust. And the people living there get 700 trips per 7 hours a day of OHV passing by there. It could have acted as shields from the migration of the dust are already dead. The noise is horrendous because the vehicles do not go 25 miles per hour. They go up to 56 miles per hour. And that because they have dense clouds, they tend to try to pass each other to get at the head of the dust clouds. They cannot see the oncoming traffic. It's a public safety issue. And there are rollovers in the area and other problems where the sheriff's office is called and 2 hours later the sheriff may appear, and this is the norm out there. So it's a big problem. It's a public safety problem, public health and public safety problem. So that needs to be addressed somewhere, whether it's in this section or has another place to go in.
Bridget, I don't disagree with you one bit. I think this is a good question, but I think it's a larger question about enforcement, about legality of these vehicles and how we have to look at them. I just feel, as I stated before, I think this is not a land use issue as much as it is a larger issue at the county. And that's why I kind of think that probably needs to be elevated. But let's go ahead, if everybody's comfortable, we'll leave it in right now. Let's see what everybody says on it, and then that'll help give us some additional guidance to be able to get the other departments involved, quite frankly. So Robert Hoffman, I'm just going to jump in here, Robert. You indicated about a vehicle noise ordinance. I can tell you the county has looked at that in the past, and there just hasn't been a lot of support, but that discussion comes up about every year. Specifically, it's usually geared towards Jake brakes with big trucks, big cement trucks usually is where we have that question. But that's something I guarantee will cycle back up as far as a bigger discussion. Enforceability of a noise ordinance is incredibly difficult because it does take special training, special equipment. It has to be done in a certain way in order to enforce that. And that's always been one of the big problems with that type of thing. I'm going to kind of push through here. I'm going to get a couple of the other things here. Tom, I see your question here about a county gun range doing that. I agree with you completely, but that's a discussion I think we need at the higher level versus at the community level. because there's bigger policy implications in play on that, because the county doesn't have a parks department. We don't have anybody we could assign to run it. It would be a larger policy discussion about creating an entire new department at the county.
I understand, David. I just wanted to know if there would be county support for it now, and this was an opportunity to find out if there's county support.
Absolutely. And what I'd like to do is have that discussion here a little later on in the process. I am a staunch Second Amendment supporter. Quite frankly, I was an Olympic hopeful in 2012 as a precision pistol shooter for the United States. So you got my attention when we start putting in gun ranges. I appreciate that a lot. Dave, I see your comment here about the questionnaire. The longer we make it, the less likely we'll get complete responses, and that's a concern. That's why we're trying to hold right now as tight as we can, but we got to dig into some of the details. So I appreciate that. So moving on here a little bit, we got a couple other environmental questions here. While we're looking at that, we are going to be looking as well as we go through the process on environmental at countywide wastewater and sewer issues, because that is a concern across the board. So that's something we will be looking at here, as we go forward throughout the process.
Dave, sorry to interrupt. It looks like Jim Collins has his hand up. I don't know if that's.
I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't hear you. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I had a comment kind of based on number 49. We're talking about OHV vehicles, but we also have a big problem in the county, especially over this side that I know of transients camping on the state trust land and on the national forest lands next to the roads. And there's very little enforcement of that. I know the regulations are out there to limit them, but they ignore them completely. That's going to be a big public safety issue. We've had started by some of these people because they're out burning campfires in no burn areas, and plus the human waste disposal that is just being dumped in the middle of the land there. Is there anything we can do to help enforce that issue?
Very, very little. Everybody is.
Can I respond to this one, David?
I'm sorry.
David,
go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, we Friends of the Forest had a presentation by the law enforcement officer of the forest district about a year ago. And this is one of the items that came up. And unfortunately, they have 1.5 people to enforce the laws on the entire Coconino National Forest. So they're, with all of the good sense of the world, it's technically impossible for them to enforce that. They just can't do it. The answer to the problem of that kind of camping is ample funding of the Forest Service so their law enforcement officers can go out and deal with the situation. When individuals do, they put themselves at risk. Not a couple of months ago, somebody went out and talked to someone about an illegal fire, and they pulled a gun on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a question that I know the Forest Service is keenly aware of, and the only way they can respond to it is if they get more funding for law enforcement, because they're the people that have to enforce those regulations.
Yeah, exactly. So moving in, the last two questions we have here in environmental, does anybody have any comments or thoughts on these? 51 and 52?
Looks like Kazi Hawk has a comment.
Yeah, I just addressed Kazi's. We're good on Kazi, so. Okay, and then number 38, Burgett, backing up real quick. Pumped water, renewable energy. Yes, it is very groundwater intensive. And it looks like your comment got cut off just a little bit as far as what your thoughts were on it, but yes, it is incredibly groundwater intensive. And a lot of cases, this is something we can't control because of the one project we've had proposed on this is on federal land completely. But it's something we need to be very concerned about. So Anything on 51 or 52? Nope. Let's go ahead and jump in and take cost of development and growth areas at the same time in the interest of time. If everybody could take a moment to read through those.
Yes, David, I'd like to add an additional question for the survey under cost of development.
Yes, who's speaking? Is that John or Tom? Tom, go ahead, John.
I would ask that a question be added or on the feelings of people to limit developers from growing beyond a point where infrastructure is reduced because of the development. And like traffic on the road.
Okay. At first glance, I don't know that would be a legal position the county could take. If they're accessing a county road, the onus switches to the county to be able to have to increase the capacity of those roads feeding that. But let me think about that. See if there's a way we can't word that in a clear way.
Thank you.
I see where you're going with it. Let me see if we can't figure something out on that. Okay. Any other comments?
Vic, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Go ahead.
Okay, I can't tell if the button's supposed to be black or red.
That's okay. It's actually supposed to be green. So.
On question 51, I'm just kind of been staring at it and rolling it around in my mouth. Species diversity and ample wildlife habitat are important to the health. That's like a statement opposed to the action in it. It's just kind of like a true false thing. Do I believe this to be true or not? There's not a, we should do this about it, or I don't know. I think it would be more meaningful if we turned that question around.
I would agree. Craig, if maybe we could consider rewording number 51 into a question more than a statement. I think that works.
We're kind of.
Sounds good. And then just for the record here, John, I'm going to kind of jump through a couple of these as just quick, easy deals here. Number 38, instead of pumped water renewable energy, I agree. The correct verbiage should be pumped water energy storage for item number 38. And then number 36, that indicated, John, Yavapai County should target new commercial farms. Yavapai County should permit new commercial solar farms. I agree. It is a matter of permitting, to allow them versus targeting them. We have no ability to bring these people in. These are ones that come to the table on their own volition. So Yavapai County should permit a new commercial solar farm is a question. And then Robert, you've got number 54. What is a problem property? I was looking at that myself here, and problem property could mean a lot of different things to different people. This is a question I have some difficulty with. We should provide incentives to developers to redevelop problem properties in a manner compatible with surrounding properties and communities. I don't know, Craig. I'm having difficulty with that question as far as what it's trying to accomplish there.
And originally, the first version of this had some examples in it, like abandoned buildings and waste sites. And in the interest of trying to shorten the question, we took away those examples.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
that may be, this may be one where
that may be what we need to add in there.
Put them back.
Yeah, because I can tell you problem properties we deal with quite a bit usually come with an odor with them and throwing my clothes away at the end of a shift. Yeah. So it's a pretty wide scale. So sounds good. Let's see here. Okay. Jim says none of the statements should be a question. It should be a position survey. I agree. With that, but I think 51, as we were referring to, I just think that I think that needs to be expanded upon a little bit on that. So
several of them to questions, David, that made them useless as a survey item.
Yeah,
I truly object again.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate that, Jim. And we will be looking at all of that. So I do appreciate your comments, Jim. I really do. Growth areas. Anybody have any comments or thought on growth areas? I know we only have 4 questions in here right now, but this is going to be, as we go forward, growth areas, it's going to be a major topic of discussion. So we're going to be drilling into this really deeply, as we go through the comprehensive plan process. So anybody have any thoughts or questions?
This is John Black. I just submitted a note here, but the term multi-use, I think, is not widely understood in the public. It's a kind of a technical buzzword. And for people to answer this question, I think they'd have to know what that means.
Yeah, and I think I would actually change the word instead of multi-use, John. That's a good point. I think I would say mixed use and then put in a little descriptor there. Mixed use just seems to be more of a, at least if that's the way I'm envisioning this question, more of a appropriate, a commercial office, bakery on the first floor and a residence on the second floor. That type of a mixed use, or in a same urban property where you have some apartments mixed with some businesses and restaurants, and having that synergy created between living and working on the same property. I think that's what it's intended to be. Okay. Anything else? Camille, did you raise your hand again, or is that still up?
Yeah, it looks like it's still up.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't ignoring you. So moving on, water. This is important. So let's take a moment to go through and read through this. Like that.
Just as a general comment here, this is Max Wilson. I would, in cases like number 62, where we mentioned specifically springs, streams, creeks, always in questions like that, again, mention rivers, both the Verde and the Hassayampa.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me jump in here first. So Craig, I'm going to recommend item number 68 be deleted. Yavapai County has no authority, when it comes to wells like that. As much as I'd like to have that type of data, we have no authority to act at all in that regard. And what I would say is that I would change from we, meaning the county here. The ones that we get in here a little bit, we should expand and maintain groundwater level monitoring. I would kind of remove the county we out of this and make it more general that, there should be groundwater level monitoring to better track, because this is, as we've said before, water shifts to Arizona Department of Water Resources. So we have very little authority to do anything in this case. But I think this is a good way to get this information to help push to the state level to say, look, there's a lot of interest in this. And these are good discussions to have at the state level. But it's not something, I don't want to create an expectation where Yavapai County would be walking in to do these things that we are not allowed to do. I think that would be my comments on the water section. Delete 68 and then just make that change the statement so that they're more generic in nature and don't create that expectation of the county.
Good.
Mm-hmm. And yes, John, I agree. We could advocate with the state for creating that database. Bridget, I see your question here, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer it. She's got a question about creating new developments, create new jobs, which means more affordable housing needs. Can we incorporate some obligation for new developments to contribute to workforce housing? Legally, unfortunately, the answer to that is no. We cannot predicate any zoning change or any project on affordability of housing or the creation of additional affordable housing for a project. That's unfortunately something we can't do here. Okay. Any thoughts on water from the rest of the group here?
David, if number 68 was changed to a volunteer database, would that be legal?
It would be legal. The problem is the county funding somebody to maintain that database and accuracy and what would the data be used for. That having that data like that could create some issues liability-wise for property owners. You know, if we're trying to show an area where wells have gone dry in the last 50 years, well, water levels change. I can tell you there's brand new wells in Coyote Springs that went dry at the 230-foot level because the water's at 250 feet. You know, so we're creating a database that has the potential to create property issues for people because their well went dry. Well, the well went dry because they didn't drill deep enough. You know, they drilled as far as they could to hit water and then they stopped, you know, which was an inadequacy on that property owner. But I have hesitation about creating a database that may have a diminution of value associated with it for real property. That could be an issue.
Is that a Prop 207? Is that an example of Prop 207?
It's not an example of Prop 207 because we're not changing any zoning to require or mandate it, but it does create at least the perception that the county may be causing a diminution of value. It's not a 207 claim, but it could be a civil claim against the county, you know, should someone have an issue. Now, let's be honest, the county gets blamed for everything no matter what we do anyways, but, you know, we try not to create liability for us.
I'd like to discuss a threat to the water system that's occurring primarily in Mojave and La Paz counties right now. And that is where La Paz County, Saudi Arabia, purchased a large acreage in order to grow alfalfa that would be feeding the animals in their distribution system.
Yes.
In Mojave County, we're getting increasing numbers of farmers that were located in the Central Valley region of California, and they're finding it is more profitable to buy up large acreage in that county in order to continue their crops, their agricultural crops. And there's just nothing that the County Board of Supervisors is able to do to limit that type of intrusion.
Yes, and that is absolutely correct. We cannot regulate any land decision based on water. And that is state law, it's case law in Arizona. We are severely, severely limited from doing so. There is a very narrow provision where the board could do something if we had a 100%, vote on that by the Board of Supervisors. But then we, as the county, have to go out and have our own hydrologists, have our own water tables. We have to take over all of the functions of ADWR when it comes to water, bring them in-house, and we become that regulatory agency. And there is nobody, that's been willing to take on that level on any county in the state of Arizona. That law's been there for several years now. Nobody's willing to take that on because of the implications of it.
David, you've mentioned a couple of times in discussions the case law on that. Separate offline from this meeting now, is it possible for you to shoot me some references to that case law?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be happy to do that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Any other thoughts on water? Any other questions here?
David, it looks like
Go ahead.
Hankey has a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
To make sure that the Big Park community is identified separately as a separate community. And we want to make sure that because we're all where all the 4.5 million tourists show up every year. So we want to make sure that our leanings and understandings and desires are controlled and managed, and you guys are actually taking advantage and understanding where our community stands.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Dave. And that's one of the reasons why, Dave, we're doing the survey, so we can find apples and apples comparisons. As we go forward here, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't speak definitively, but I really believe we're probably going to end up with a regionalized approach to the comprehensive plan to help address the individual regions in there. But the comprehensive plan is a county-wide document. So we have to find, a lot of those common visions for everybody. But I still believe we have enough communities that behave differently from each other from a development point of view that we have to probably look at the regional approach here, which has never been done in Yavapai County. The last document, it was I say a 10,000 foot level. It was probably 100,000 foot level on Yavapai County's needs and thoughts on that. But we're trying to find where that balance exists. That's why, we're trying to have one survey right now that everybody can answer. That's going to give us a lot of data internally to help say, okay, look, these communities all behave the same. Now we've got a region. Now we can better plan. Because the problem we have is with, 25 to 30 communities, you can imagine the difficulty we would get into with planning and trying to do anything with that number of communities, that number of community plans, and having some type of cohesive document that provides those expectations. But yes, I can assure you, we are listening to everybody on this. It's my goal to get that inclusive nature in this plan and get it all taken care of. So Burgett had a comment, is there a statute that forbids monitoring or creating a database? In the last legislative session, Kavanaugh brought up monitoring groundwater level in rural areas. I am not aware of any piece of legislation that prohibits it from being done. And in that same sense, I am not aware of any empowering legislation that allows groundwater monitoring of individual wells on someone's private property. I am unaware of that existing anywhere in state law. And that's the problem with the monitoring of wells in rural areas, is that it is on somebody's private property. So there is no ability for the county to go in and say, we need to check your water level on any given day. That was part of what Kavanaugh and some of the others were trying to do to help those folks in Mojave County to figure out what was happening. And there was just no desire from a property rights point of view at the legislature to look at that. And then John answered yes. And community plans, we don't know whether they're going to be adopted. We don't know what's going to happen here. This is an ongoing discussion. So where we start today, and I've said this repeatedly, where we start today, we don't know where we're going to land. That is going to be driven by the communities, by the Board of Supervisors. Staff is here to help all of you through this process. And then, those plans will be, or the questions, all of the information, they'll be aggregated together. We're going to have a lot of discussions. We'll be working all of that through the advisory committee. We'll be working all of it through the planning commission, and then finally the board. We have no idea, truly where this lands, but that's why all of this information is so critical that we start getting it in so we can start analyzing and seeing where we go. Lastly here, we have the freeform question, and this is just a good open, discussion. I think that question works great. Does anybody have any comments on item number 70?
David, I'm sorry to bring us back to the last section. I've got a baby in my hand, so I couldn't type out my.
Oh, no problem at all. Go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, you mentioned not being able to make regulatory decisions based on water issues. Could we have a question here, like we should incentivize low water use growth? So we look at those PAD choices and things along those lines?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why I mentioned to Craig, we've got to get it. In this section of questions, we cannot use the county we here. These need to be more, goal question related, but it can't be driven from the county's point of view. It needs to be driven from the citizen's point of view. So water impact, from proposed development should be assessed and shared with public. Quite frankly, that's not something we can even legally do. And I would add, as I see that now, Craig, 67 needs to come off the list too. That's going to be in a Department of Water Resources function completely. So we'll need to remove that. But, should there be a program to monitor ground level water? That as a generic statement is fine. And that'll help give our board members, quite frankly, the feedback to take to the legislature to say there is interest here, or there isn't interest, depending upon what the answers are. But the county cannot act on behalf of water when it comes to a regulatory authority. We just have no jurisdiction at all.
So a statement like there should be a program that incentivizes low water use development would be fine, but we couldn't say we should develop it. Okay.
Exactly. Now we talk about that, and that's a really good comment. So that's part of it. So, if we took that statement you just made, there should be a program to incentivize low water use development. As the development services director, I look at that and I say, there's options here. Let's have the developer, if they're interested, let's have them stipulate low flow toilets, low flow water fixtures, xeriscaping options, or extremely low water use native plants, rainwater harvesting. Those are options we can start bringing in to have the developers bring that in to look at offsets from other things as part of a planned area development. I mean, that's absolutely appropriate. That we can drill into right now and deal with every day of the week. What I can't say is this house can only pump a maximum of X number of gallons a month. That I can't touch. So, any other thoughts or questions?
Looks like Karen has a question.
Yes, Karen. Go ahead, Karen, ask your question.
Yeah, and you just addressed it. I was wondering about putting in a question about rainwater harvesting.
Yeah. So rainwater harvesting is a tough one. So if I had a developer come in and say, I want to build this subdivision and I want some offsets from different things. I need maybe a little reduced setbacks or, something of those lines. We could say, look, you're going to have rainwater harvesting at each house. So every, property has it. That's something we can build into a planned area development and have that discussion. There is no way to really encourage people to do rainwater harvesting on their own. Our landscape ordinance recognizes and says, hey, look, this is great if you can do it. As staff, we have always encouraged it. There was a program back, about 6 years ago now. It's been a while. But the local Coca-Cola distributor, they had a surplus of big 55-gallon drums that they had that were left over from syrup or they were mixing stuff. They were giving them out to the public with rainwater harvesting kits to tie it into your house, your rain gutters. So we were pushing that program, trying to encourage everybody to get up there and go get your free rainwater harvesting kit. So those are things I think we can definitely do, and working with other partners to make that happen. I think rainwater harvesting is great. I think, even going in and doing rainwater recharge. So instead of just flowing it out to the street, you actually take it into a French drain, let it go back in on your property quickly. There's really good ways to manage rainwater. U of A has done some wonderful studies on that, and I think that's good.
David.
Jim, I'm not following your question.
David, this is Dave Hankey.
Yes.
Yeah, so first off, I would like to commend you and your staff for doing this meeting.
Thank you.
Getting the inputs from the entire community. And it's a big ass county, so it's really hard to do this. And so the problem is that as a corporate executive for 50 years, I think your survey is so long that your participation rate is going to be so small that you're not really going to get a glimpse of the entire county's opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I think the questions are well done. I like KPSB. I'm a member. I like what you've done. But in surveys, you have to be very succinct. Mm-hmm. And you need to get down to fewer questions. This is going to take over an hour for somebody to answer.
Yeah.
Potentially. And you're going to drop off people by the time you get to section 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're not going to get the data that you want. So I would crisp it up a lot.
Yeah.
And get to something more.
And Dave, I appreciate that comment. As I said, we all are seeing this for the very first time in this meeting. And I agree with you, the length of it is pretty long. And that's something, Craig and I, and John, everybody with KSB, we can help work on trimming this down a little bit, because I think that is a very good, valid comment.
David, I think another thing that could be done is to release the survey in sections instead of all at once, like maybe a week apart. Maybe, yeah. I don't know.
I don't disagree, Tom. That may be a really good way to do that too.
Tom,
is to do that in pieces.
Great idea, Tom. That's a great idea.
Yeah. How we eat the elephant.
Release a short survey, and one of the items in that survey be, would you be interested in answering more, indirect questions?
Yeah, and that may not be a bad idea either. I think that was Jim speaking. That may not be a bad idea either, is to do a short survey, pick the top, 2-3 questions out of each one, and have that as a quick survey, and then be able to drill down into the bigger survey, or break it up. We're really genuinely wide open. I'm more concerned about what you guys think and what we can do, because this is going to be data. We're going to use it here in development services to help make a lot of our forecasts as we go forward on how to deal with this. But this is going to be used for your community vision statements too. So, I want to really emphasize whatever comments you've got, we're open to them, and, whatever we can do to integrate it. We're hosting this on the county's website so that we can get it out to everybody. It's a good, easy platform, but this is going to be, publicly viewable to everybody, and, as interactive as can be.
No, I like the last comment very much. I think breaking it up into pieces so that you see the trunk, and then you see the belly, and then you see the tail makes a lot of sense.
Right? I think so. So, and then Jim Fortney had a quick comment, just briefly. Am I suggesting that what the Board of Supervisors doing with Stringfield is illegal? No, not in the least. That's related to assured water supply. That was stipulated on these rezoning for the Stringfield zoning case. The only reason it was stipulated is it was a matter of concern, but that is an absolute requirement that the Stringfield developer provide a assured water supply certificate to the department. That is a plat requirement because we're in an active management area. So the board is not predicating the approval on water. That is a requirement that is already there, already in state law, already in county regulations, that it must be complied with, but it is not a county decision. It's a decision by the Arizona Department of Water Resources Director that there is adequate water. It's a checkbox that has to be checked off there. So I hope that answers your question here just a little bit. And then, John, we already talked about yours as far as a lot of questions. I think we got that answered. Nancy, you had a question. Nancy Rowland, you had one.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Typing it. This is totally off the survey. I'm from the Beaver Creek Community Association, a board member. We were wondering, will the county have any funds available to help unincorporated communities like ours to send out the survey to via mail? Because we have very limited funds, but we have like 5,000 people we want to be in contact with on the survey. Are there any funds available to help us out with that?
Well, right now we're trying to get the whole survey out online. I'm trying to avoid a paper survey as much as possible, which is why we're going to be hosting it on our website. We're going to be helping push it out and get links to all of the community groups so they can send it out in there. If we need to get it out to individual community members who may not have access to a computer, talk to me about that. Let me see what I can do on my end to help that. I've got a limited mailing budget available, but I think I can, we can get some out in individual communities if that is needed for people that don't have computer access. But having it in the computer really helps us with analyzing the data, being able to aggregate it quickly, and see what those questions are. But we can see what we can do to help you out, Nancy. Just let me know.
Okay, thank you, David. I appreciate it. And I also wanted to just thank Craig and his team. This was an excellent first try at the survey. We'll look it over, but it was a very good thought out survey. Thank you all.
You bet. Burgett, you had a quick question going back to water here. Oh, hold on. Can we get Burgett unmuted? There we go. Burgett, you're unmuted now. Go ahead.
Okay. Agricultural use is not addressed in the survey, especially not agricultural runoff that reaches groundwater and the surface waters. Should some questions be included in the survey?
What would you recommend? What are you thinking? Is there something in particular you're thinking about? Okay.
Thinking about the agriculture is the biggest water user everywhere, and also produces a lot of toxic runoff, nitrogen or phosphate runoff into the groundwater, and part goes down to the earth, into the groundwater, or it runs off into the stream. And so I'm just wondering, I don't know how much agricultural area is in the whole county, but should some survey questions be addressing these problems?
Yeah. Offhand, I actually posed a couple of interesting questions there I want to follow up on in the future. Craig and I can talk about maybe some other expanding some of these out a little bit, or we can deal with that as a larger discussion on the comprehensive plan level when we get to water. Because I am kind of curious about that. I have a couple of thoughts, but I want to flesh them out a little bit more before I start talking about them. So I'll put that down on our list. So, and then
David, it's Camille Cox. I've got one comment.
Yes, go ahead, Camille.
I think it's really important that we make this survey accessible to people that don't have a computer.
Yes, I agree.
One avenue we might use is the public library system. we just put somebody on, actually the new director, Judy Poe, from the Sedona Public Library System onto our community plan committee. And she actually raised some really interesting ideas, being an assistant in this effort. So that's one thought, but I think it's really important that we're getting the average people that are challenged in different ways, economically or technology-wise. I know that the people in the Beaver Creek area have a real problem with internet access there.
Yes, they do.
Anyway, just some thinking along those lines.
No, I agree completely, Camille. And that's been something I've been trying to wrestle with and see how we can better get into these other communities. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Beaver Creek, your cell phone barely works down there. So wireless, internet service is very, very limited in that area. But that's the same problem we run into up in the I-40 corridor as well. So we've been kind of thinking about the libraries a little bit as one option. I'm going to probably try to target some additional community meetings when we get to being able to hold meetings again up in those areas as well. But yeah, any other ideas we've got, mailing lists, anything like that, we're happy to. And as I said, whatever the communities need, whatever you guys need, please let me know. I'm very good at coming up with creative solutions or finding some money to do things for a lot of these types of projects. So I just need to know what you guys need, and we can make it happen. So. What other comments, John? It looked like you had some questions or thoughts. Go ahead.
Yes, it has to do with a number of questions that came up in our discussion in the KSP group. One idea we came up with was to have a kind of a cover page for the survey where you would list each of these topics, and above that you would say you don't have to answer all the questions. Click on the topics that are of particular interest to you. And I don't think any one topic has more than about 10 questions. So allow them to decide how much time they want to spend, and they can selectively invest their time where they are most concerned.
Yeah.
So that would be a thing you want to pass along to your IT people as far as how to set up the survey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Craig, I see your comment here about doing the survey in Spanish as well. Absolutely. As soon as we get to a final draft, I can send it out to translation, and we can get it converted into Spanish very easily to get out to everybody. Any other thoughts or comments? We went a little longer than expected, but I have to say, I think this was a fantastic discussion. Once we get all the changes integrated into this, we will push it back out to everybody for additional comments and inclusion. If anybody has anything else they want to add, you think about, please send them in to me, and we will get them included as part of all of this mix. But does anybody else have anything? Nope. Very good. Again, as I always say, I really do appreciate everybody's time on this. I want to throw a special shout out here to Craig and John especially. You guys took on a lot of work on your own without us asking you to do so. And truly, I genuinely appreciate that. That's one of the things with the community plans and the comprehensive plan. I really love, it's what I love about this county, that everybody's willing to come together and help and just jump in, and truly put together an amazing product. So I really, really appreciate it. As soon as we get this done, I will send it out to everybody for, kind of a final review. Once we get that done, we can shift that off, get it translated, we can get it up on the website. I am anticipating our website will be online in 2 weeks. We're shooting right at the end of the month right now to have it up and running. I want to get this on there, get everything published, and we'll be good to go. The only update I want to provide for everybody, just a general update, is that we were going to have appointments made this coming meeting here for the Board of Supervisors for the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. That has been pushed off 1 month. Just to take into account some additional needs in some of the districts and some additional discussions. I can tell you a couple of you on this chat tonight are on that short list for that. I greatly appreciate it. I will be sending out information to you guys here pretty quick about that. sort of some information to fill out and everything, but I really, really, really appreciate everybody's help, everybody's discussion. This was a great discussion tonight, so thank you, everybody. And I think we're good. Andrea, if you could go ahead and close out the recording on this, and this is another recording.